Talk Radio.
Michemo apura kanu apura kaitnut. Ineye ojira da. Medinde ojira po kwesi ra nehm pata akan. Akwamumain amaruka etipimu ojira po, that means greetings to all apura kani apura kaiti people, meaning African black people. Today is Ojira Day, Purification Day. My name is Ojirapo Kwesi Radnehem Pata Akan, Ojirapo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yet I say for tuning in for this special broadcast. We're going to be addressing and talking about Kwabena Akosan, called Malcolm X. This is his KRADA, his Soul Day. So first we're going to play a couple to get into the information.
If you can't do for yourself what the white man is doing for himself, don't say you're equal with the white man. If you can't put up a factory like he set up a factory, don't talk about equality talk. Who are you? You know what? I ain't Negro. That's not it. Well, you before the white man means you a Negro. Then where were you? And what did you have? What was yours? What language did you speak then? What was your name? It couldn't have been Smith or Jones or Blunt or Powell. That wasn't your name. I don't have to kind of name where you and I came from. Oh, what was your name? And why don't you now know what your name was then? Where did it go? Where did you lose it? Who took it? And how did he get it? What song did you speak? How did the man take your song? Where is your history? How did the man wipe out your history? What did the man do to make you as dumb as you are right now? This is American justice. This is American democracy. And those of you who are familiar with it know that in America, democracy is hypocrisy. Now, if I'm wrong, put me in jail. But if you can't prove that if democracy is not hypocrisy, then don't put your hands on me. Democracy is hypocrisy. If democracy means freedom, why aren't our people free? If democracy means justice, why don't we have justice? If democracy means equality, why don't we have equality? If you can't do it, no Negro leaders have fought for civil rights. They have begged for civil rights. They have begged the white man for civil rights. They have begged the white man for freedom. Never done anything to take another man to set you free. You will never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourself. And until the American Negro lets the white man know that we are really, really ready, really pay the price that is necessary for freedom, our people will always be walking around here second class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves. What price you're talking about? The price of freedom is death. No Negro fought for civil rights. They have begged for civil rights. They have begged the white man for civil rights. They have begged the white man for freedom. Never done anything to beg another man to set you free. You will never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourself. And until the American Negro lets the white man know that we are really, really ready, really pay the price that is necessary for freedom, our people will always be walking around here second class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves. What price you're talking about? The price of freedom is death. No Negro. 22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political conscience, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. They see that whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close, they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And this is which means any block, any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who will go to the White House and who will stay in the doghouse. I would like to make a few comments concerning the difference between the Black Revolution and the Negro Revolution. revolution hosted without taking careful consideration what this word actually means and what its historic characteristics are. When you study the historic nature of revolution, the motive of a revolution, the objective of a revolution, and the result of a revolution, and the methods used in a revolution, may change words, may devise another program, may change your goal, and may change your mind. Look at the American Revolution in 1776. That revolution was for what? For land. Why did they want land? Independence. How was it carried out? Bloodshed. Number one, it was based on land. The basis of independence. And the only way they could get it was bloodshed. The French Revolution. What was it based on? The landless against the landlord. What was it for? Land. How did they get it? Bloodshed. Was no love lost. Was no compromise. Was no negotiation. I'm telling you, you don't know what our revolution is. Because when you find out what it is, you'll get back in the out. You'll get out of the way.
Chiamo, Apurakanu, Apuraikaitnu, for those who just came back on the line. Medinde, Ojirafo, Kwesi, Radnehmpata, Akan, Apamuman, Amaruka, Etipimu, Ojirafo, that means greetings to all Apurakani, Apurakaiti people, meaning African black people. Today is ODWIRA Day, Purification Day. My name is ODWIRA for Kwesi Rad Nehempata Akan. ODWIRA for the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yet I say once again, for the people who've joined on the phone lines and in the chat room and so forth, for this special broadcast, if you are on the phone line, you have a question or a comment, hit the number 1 so we can see your hand is raised for the individuals who are in the chat room. If you like to comment in the chat room and connect in the chat room, simply log in with the username. If you do not have a username, you can sign up for one quickly in Blog Talk. So what we wanted to do today, because today, of course, is the KRADA, meaning the soul day, as we say in the Akan tradition, the soul day of Malcolm X, Tuesday, Benada. He was born on May 19th, so-called 1925, which was a Benada, a Tuesday. And as you saw in the promotion for the show, we referenced Malcolm X as Kwabena Akosan. And we're going to get into that reason. We're going to get into that, the nature of that name. We're talking about Malcolm X from an Akan perspective, and the nature of his character, the nature of his spirit, the nature of his spiritual disposition, and the root of that spiritual disposition, and why we are drawn to his power, drawn to his articulation of our condition, and why we still, reverence this brother. Let's deal with, first of all, a little bit of truthstory. Malcolm X, born in so-called 1925, Omaha, Nebraska. He was born, his father's Earl Little, his mother's Louise Little. So now we begin to understand, when you look at his parents, the nature of his spiritual disposition and how it was beginning to be formed. Earl Little was a Baptist lay minister, but he was also the head and at one point the president of the Omaha division of the United Negro Improvement Association, which was the organization founded by Marcus Garvey. His mother, Louise, she was a division secretary, and she was writing documents and about events and so forth for the Negro World newspaper. She was actively participating in the UNIA. Malcolm said in his own autobiography that his proudest images of his father was when his father was campaigning militantly against the whites and their offspring, spreading the message of the UNIA, spreading the message of Africa for Africans. He said that his father would take him alone, just him, Malcolm, alone, outside of the other children, to UNIA meetings. These meetings at people's homes and so forth. Of course, they were being harassed by the Ku Klux Klan. They were forced to move from Nebraska and forced to move to Wisconsin and eventually forced to move to Michigan because of the activity that his father was engaged in. Eventually, his father was murdered by the whites and their offspring. His mother suffered over the years and eventually had a spiritual breakdown, spiritual discordance, so-called mental illness as a result of various things that were going on. So as you see, with regard to the nature of what happened in the family, first and foremost, Malcolm came from a blood line, a father and a mother who were grounded in Pan-Africanism, concerned with the plight of Afro-Kani people. You begin to see what was shaping and molding Malcolm from the beginning. If you look at where Earl Little was from, he was from Reynolds, Georgia. And of course, in Georgia, slavery took place in Georgia, but there was also a number of slave revolts, rebellions, wars against the whites and their offspring in Georgia. Of course, we talked about the Gullah War, where the Gullah people, the Afro-Kani people from different ethnic groups. You had people from the Senegambia region. You had people from the so-called Gold Coast and Ivory Coast. You had people from Angola. You had people from South Africa, as well as some from East, all comprising this group later called the Gullah people. And some of the Gullah people escaped from enslavement, waged war against the whites in their offspring, and they're called the Gullah Wars, often misnomer as the Seminole War. And they fought against the United States government, the United States Army, that was under the direction of Andrew Jackson. They fought a war against the Army, and within the first 6 years, the Gullah soldiers killed 1,500 American soldiers, prompting the United States and the military leaders to say this was not an Indian war, this was a Negro war against the whole of the United States. The Gullah fought the whites and their offspring for over 50 years, and they were never dragged back into enslavement. The Afro-Kaini people, these populations that made up the Gullah people, they freed themselves in the late so-called 1700s and remained free intergenerationally, fighting against the whites and their offspring and never taken back into enslavement. So you have individuals like this, groups like this, that forge the consciousness of an Earl Little. So when he's born and raised and recognizes the brutality of the whites and their offspring and recognizes in his own blood circle, in his own lineage, as well as those Afro-Kaini people in his area who have waged war against the whites and their offspring, he has this consciousness already forged within him. So therefore, when he comes in contact with other individuals who start a new movement built on these old foundations of freeing ourselves from the whites and their offspring and reclaiming our identity and reclaiming our independence and becoming secure in that independence and sovereignty, when he sees a new movement arising, then he embraces that movement because he's born of that movement. This is intergenerational. When you look at Malcolm's mother, Louise Little, she was from Grenada. And when you look at what happened in Grenada, there's a major rebellion in Grenada, the Julian Fedon Rebellion. When you look at the Julian Fedon Rebellion, they waged war against the whites and their offspring and took over almost the entire island of Grenada for over a year. Soldiers waging war against the whites and their offspring. So his mother's bloodline, her blood circle, within that blood circle, within that, consciousness, is a consciousness of freedom, liberation from the whites and their offspring, liberation from enslavement, freedom, security, sovereignty, and so forth. So this is already in the bloodline of his mother and father, in the patriclan and matriclan inheritance of Malcolm before he's even conceived. And so eventually, when his mother and father meet and they unite, they become part of the UNIA and eventually conceive Malcolm X, he's already born into this kind of consciousness. When he was a young man, of course, as we said earlier, he would go to the meetings with his father. He would see his father meeting with Afro-Kaini people who would take, going to private meetings at homes in different locations, sharing information, spreading the word, building the organization, focused intently on freedom and independence and justice for Afro-Kaini people. Father is murdered. His mother eventually suffers a spiritual discordance, spiritual disorientation, so-called mental illness, and she's sent to a mental institution, psychiatric institution. And therefore, Malcolm and his brothers and sisters are sent into foster care and sent to different homes and so forth and split up and separated. No different than enslavement when our people were forced on the plantation and children were separated from mothers and fathers and so forth, and they were separated. So he's going through the same thing. He saw even before that took place. He saw the whites and their offspring firebomb his home. He saw his father defending himself, defending his family against the whites and their offspring, directly against the Ku Klux Klan. Of course, he recognized the reality that when his father was murdered, he was assassinated by the whites and their offspring. So he understood from an early age. He was raised from an early age to recognize who he was as an Afro-Kaini person, recognize his position in the world, our position in the world, and move towards independence, freedom, and sovereignty. And before his father had a chance to continue that work, he was cut down. So already seated within the young man was that consciousness. His understanding of the relationship between Afro-Kaini people and our open enemy, the whites and their offspring. That consciousness was forged in the crucible of white pseudo-supremacist society. He had direct experience in life, whether it was in school, whether it was the firebombing, no matter where it was, he had direct experience with the whites and offspring from a young man all the way through adulthood. He understood that relationship. So then, of course, he gets involved later on in life. He's a young man, a teenager, and so forth, and into his late teens, and by the time he turns 20, into different kinds of organized crime on a lower scale. Eventually, he becomes incarcerated. He's incarcerated when he's 21, and eventually he gets out when he's 27. So we must recognize that he's a young man when he gets out of prison. And of course, he never continued, he never became, an elder. He was cut down when he was 39, so he was a young man when he was assassinated. So we must recognize that reality. But when we talk about his nature, his disposition, his spiritual disposition, he had that consciousness that was seated in him from the time he was born. It was matured within him as he grew and developed. And any movement that he would have taken place or taken part in and taken a place in, because of the nature of his spirit, the nature of his consciousness, he would have risen to the occasion and risen to the top and became a leader in that movement. He ended up joining the Nation of Islam, encouraged by his siblings when he was in prison, and of course we know what happened after that. But even before he gets to that point, we want to get to not only how his spiritual disposition was formed when he was a young man, but what is the origin of his spiritual disposition. Why do we reference him as Kwabena Akosan in the Akan language? We're going to get to the nature of his disposition. Where does it come from? Even before he gets into the womb. So we're going to give an Akan perspective in particular, but an African perspective in general. So we have a better understanding of who the man is and why we are drawn to his spiritual disposition, to his character, kind of energy complex he had, and how it affects the rest of our people and how we see some of that same kind of, that spiritual configuration of energy within other people as well. In the Akan tradition, we utilize the 7-day week. It was Afurakani people who founded the 7-day week. We recognize the movement of the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies and their cyclical manifestation, and we understood how they govern a 7-day cycle. And we began to organize our activities according to that 7-day cycle. In our Akan culture, and this is going back thousands of years before the whites and offspring existed on Earth, when Afurakani people migrated from ancient Khanat, the Khanit land, so-called Nubia, and settled ancient Kamit and established that civilization, some of our people migrated further north into what would later be called Kanana, so-called Canaan, prior to the whites and their offspring existing in the world. We continued to practice the same culture. Of course, we went into so-called Sumer and Elam and eventually the rest of the Near East, as well as ancient India and so forth, the Harappa civilization and so forth, and all around the world our people migrated and we carried the same culture, the same ancestral religion, worshiping the same divinities, male and female, everywhere we went. And of course, we also migrated to different parts of Africa and carried the same culture quite naturally with us. When we migrated into so-called Near East and we fashioned that 7-day cycle, that 7-day week, and organized our activities based on that 7-day week, we continue to utilize that 7-day week, and Akan people still utilize that 7-day week. It is a superstructure that governs all of our activities. Our people are named based on the 7-day week simply because there are solar and lunar and planetary bodies that govern the 7 days. Those solar, lunar, and planetary bodies are animated by Obosom, forces in nature, goddesses and gods, divinity, deity. And we know who these divinities are. These are the same divinities from ancient Khanit and Kamit, with the same names, with the same functions, operating in the same aspects of creation. We are still possessed by these divinities. We still communicate with them for libation, engage in ritual practice, and so forth. We call them the kradin bosom, the Obosom of the kradin, or the soul names of Akan people. The 7 days of the week in Akan culture are Kwesida, Joda, Benada, Awukuda, Yauda, Sida, and Menada, Sunday through Saturday. If you look at the first day of the week, the sun, Kwesida, that is the solar energy that governs that particular day. The second day, Joda, the moon, the bosom, governs that particular day. The third day is the day of the planet Bena or Abena, and the male and female Obosom that govern that planet. The whites and offspring called Mars. That Obosom is called Bena, and the female Obosom is called Abena. Bena and Abena, the male and female force that animates that planetary body, are called Heru Behudet or Heru Behudet in ancient Kemet, and Sechima or Sekhmet in ancient Kemet. They are called Ogun and Nyamewaa-Nyame in the Yoruba tradition. They're called Ogun and Ananu in the Vodoun tradition. So when we talk about Bena and someone born on Benada or the day of Bena, we are talking about someone who was born under the agency of that force in nature. That day of the week, at the first hour of sunrise, that particular planetary body, or Ochin Nsoroma, its energy is bathing the planet, and it affects the atmosphere and affects us in a profound fashion. When Akan people are born on a specific day, it is an indication from the Nananum Nsamanfo, who have ushered us into the womb and made sure we were born on a specific day. It is an indication from them, as well as the Obosom, the forces in nature, an indication of the divinity that we were aligned with pre-incarnation, before our spirits entered the womb. So before we enter the womb, when we're spirits, ancestresses, and ancestors in the ancestral realm, before we are drawn into the womb of one of our descendants to be born once again into the world, and every time an Afurakani male and Afurakaiti female unite, copulate, and conceive a child, the sperm and ovum unite to create that zygote, but it is the spirit of one of their ancestors, or the spirit of one of their ancestresses, that has entered into that newly formed zygote. Someone has returned. An ancient ancestor, ancient ancestress, one of the Nsamanfo, has returned into the womb and will be born back into the world to live once again into the world. So when you see your child, you're looking at one of your ancestresses and ancestors who have lived in the past and who have returned once again to the world. But prior to that spirit entering into the womb, it is drawn to Nyamewaa-Nyame, the great mother and the great father. Amenet-Amen, as we call them in ancient Kamit and Khanit. That spirit is given a kra, as we call it in the Akan tradition, a soul, a divine consciousness. That kra in Akan is called the ka in ancient Kemet, the soul, the divine consciousness. It's called Ori, Inu in the Yoruba tradition, and Se, Lido in Vodoun, and Chi in Igbo. It is a divinity. It is an Obosom, a divinity, a force in nature in and of itself. It is a male divinity, spirit force in creation. For males, assigned to males. For females, it will be a female divinity, a female force in nature assigned to females. That is a force in nature that is assigned to dwell with the individual. This spirit to guide them throughout the course of their lives. It takes up residence in the head region. So just like with your physical body, you have a smaller physical body within your physical body in the head region. That smaller physical body, of course, is the brain. And it regulates the functions of all the various organs and organ systems in the body. In your spirit body, your sunsum, as it is called in the Akan tradition, you also have a spiritual brain, a force in the head region of your spirit body, your spirit's brain. It is an entity. It is a divinity, a male divinity if you're male, a female divinity if you're female. That force is called the Ka, or Kra, the soul, the divine consciousness for males, and Ka'et in ancient Kemet, or Krawa in Akan, the soul, the divine consciousness. It is a divinity that is directed by the Supreme Being to go and dwell with this individual in the head region. That force in your head region that always pulls you towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with divine order. That force is your Kra, your soul, your divine consciousness. And when you develop a relationship with that force, with that divinity that dwells in your head region, the communications become more vivid, become more direct, to the extent that that force will show him or herself to the individual. That force dwells with us throughout the course of our lives. And encoded within that force, which is our spirit's brain, is a specific function we are to execute in creation, the manner in which we are to execute that function, and the spiritual configuration of energy we are given to execute that function. So as we use the example, if you are an immune system cell within the great body of the Supreme Being, if that's what you're fashioned to be, because Apurakani people, we are cells within the great divine body of Nyamewaa-Nyame, the Supreme Being, Amenet-Amen, the Supreme Being. So just like you have a body, you have smaller bodies within your body that regulate order within your body, which are the organs and glands and so forth. And those organs and glands have children, which are the cells. And the cells serve the organs. And when they serve their parent organs, they're serving you, the whole body, the great parent at the same time. We are cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. The organs within the great divine body are the forces in nature, the Obosom, the Orisha, the Vodoun, the Ntorotu, misnomer, Neteru, and Netetu, and so forth. The forces in nature that regulate order in creation. They are the embodiments of divine order in the great divine body. We are cells within those organs. Organs are our parent organs. And when we serve our parent organs as cells of those organs, we're serving the whole great divine body at the same time. So if you were born as an immune system cell within the great divine body of the Supreme Being, then you will have to be naturally inclined towards immune system function. When you see disorder in creation, you'll be naturally inclined to move towards that disorder and eradicate that disorder. You will feel that pull in your head region from your own Ka, your own Kra, your soul, your divine consciousness, pulling you towards that disorder to eradicate it, so that you can maintain the integrity of the order in Apurakani society. Just as your immune system seeks out and destroys cancerous cells that develop, isolates them and kills them and expels them from the body to maintain the integrity of the order of the body. That is the immune system function. And the cells of the immune system serve that system. And when they serve the immune system functions, they serve the entire body at the same time. If you are a child of a force in nature, that is the immune system force in nature, then you will be naturally inclined towards those functions. When we talk about Bena, Beda, or Bedeti, Heru Bena, as we call in the Akan tradition, Bena, he is the force in nature, the male force that governs the immune system in the great divine body of the Supreme Being. Abena or Sechima Sekmet is the female force that governs that divine immunity, the lymphatic system, and so forth. But Bena is the male force. He's also the force that governs the planet Bena, which is so-called Mars, but we call it Bena. In ancient Kemet, it's Heru Behudet. That planet is also called Heru Desher, or the Red Heru. So when we talk about Kwabena, somebody born on Benada, someone born on a Tuesday, Benada, that means an Apurakani person who was assigned to Bena pre-incarnation, when they, as an ancestral spirit, were drawn to Nyamewaa-Nyame. And if Malcolm was an Akan person, that means that when he was an ancestor, before he was born into the world in 12,925, or so-called 1925, before he entered into his mother's womb, he was an ancestor. And his spirit was drawn to Nyamewaa-Nyame. And he was assigned the Obosom Bena, and that divinity took up residence, a child of that divinity took up residence in his head region. So that force is in his head region. And then he's sent into a womb. The Nsamanfo, the other Nsamanfo, the ancestresses and ancestors usher their colleague, that ancestral spirit, now into the womb. He is a spirit of sunsum that has a kra, a soul, and that soul is governed by the Obosom Bena. And because that soul is governed by the Obosom Bena, it has that fiery function of the immune response, enforcer of divine order, divinity of hot metal and war and fire. All of that is encoded within the kra, the soul of a Kwabena, a servant or messenger kwa, or subject kwa of the Obosom Bena. And so he's sent into the womb. And then 40 weeks later, he is born into the world, and the Obosom Bena and the Nananom Nsamanfo will make sure that because he was assigned to Bena pre-incarnation, he will come out of the womb on the day of Bena, Benada, or the day of Bena, Tuesday, the day that's governed by the planet Bena. And when he's born on that particular day, and that particular planet energy is bathing the earth and affecting the atmosphere of earth, and when this child takes his first breath, the energy of the earth is bathed by the Obosom Bena, so the energy that moves through his system and electrifies his blood cells and so forth, and electrifies his spirit and aligns his spiritual energy with his kra, is the energy of the Obosom Bena, and it fills up his body when he takes his first breath. He is a child of Bena, so he is born already with that divine function, and therefore automatically he receives the kradin Kwabena, or servant of Bena, and he moves forward. So this is the origin, the provenance of the spiritual disposition of Malcolm. So we're going to talk about the Obosom Bena in a little bit more detail. When you look at our article, we posted the link in the chat room, our article dealing with the Obosom Bena, and we'll put that link back in the chat room right now. You see the information that we touched on already. You'll see the planet Bena, the red planet, is the fourth enforcer of divine order, is the male force of the divine immune system within the great divine body of Nyamewaa-Nyame, the supreme being. He has many different titles in ancient Kemet. He's one of the Heru divinities, the hawk-headed divinity. Of course, the hawk is the highest flying bird in ancient Kamit and Khanit, fiery bird of war, piercing vision, and so forth. So he's one of the Heru divinities, one of the hawk or falcon divinities, Heru Behudet or Bedet or Bedeti Bena. He's also called Heru Mesen, which means the foundry, the metal-working foundry, the iron-working foundry, the Obosom of metal and so forth. He's called Heru or ODWIRA, Heru, the great one, the elder and so forth. He is the son of Ra. And you'll also see him take the form of the winged sun disk, waging war against the enemy. Let's look at a portion of a text dealing with Bena from ancient Kemet, talking about the functioning and describing the functioning of this force of nature. And when you see the functioning of this force of nature, then you'll understand the spiritual disposition forged within our brother before he even came into the womb. This is a text from ancient Kemet, the so-called legend of Heru Bedeti, Heru of Edfu. And it says, and this is in the article as well, it says, behold, the enemies of Ra rushed into the water, and they took the forms of crocodiles and hippopotami, but nevertheless, Ra Herakuti sailed over the waters in his boat, and when the crocodiles and the hippopotami had come close to him, they opened wide their jaws in order to destroy Ra Herakuti. Ra, of course, is the creator of the world, and Ra'et is the creatress. And when Heru Behudet or Bedet or Bedat arrived, and his followers who were behind him in the forms of workers in metal, each having in his hand an iron spear and a chain, according to his name, they smote the crocodiles and the hippopotami, and they were brought in their straight way 151 crocodiles which had been slain before the city of Edfu. Then spoke Ra Hirakuti to Heru Behudet, my image shall be here in the land of the south, which is the house of victory of strength, and the house of Heru Behudet is called Nek-Het, the house of strength and triumph to this day. Then the divinity Tahuti spoke after he had looked upon the enemies lying upon the ground, saying, let your hearts rejoice, O you Obosom, or divinities of the heavenly realm. Let your hearts rejoice, O you divinities who are in the earth. Heru, the youthful one, comes in peace, and he has made manifest on his journey deeds of very great might, which he has performed according to the book of slaying the hippopotamus. And from that day, figures of Heru Behudet, or Behudet, in metal have existed. Then Heru took upon himself the form of the winged death, and he placed himself on the front of the boat of Ra. So what we're talking about here, when you're talking about Heru Behudet or Heru Bena, he's called Behudet. In ancient Kamit, he's called Bena in Akan culture. In ancient Kamit, they made statues of metal of this force in nature because he's the divinity of hot, metal, and fire and war, enforcing divine order, protecting the creator and creatress. When you talk about the divine living energy animating your body, as well as the divine living energy animating the created universe and all created entities, naturally occurring created entities, that divine living energy is moving through your bloodstream. And inside your bloodstream, your immune system operates through the bloodstream. And it is dependent upon the iron to wage war against the toxins and bacteria and so forth. If you have iron-poor blood, then you become anemic and you become weak. But if you have the right amount of iron in your blood, then you have the capacity to wield that electromagnetic energy, that life force energy that's moving through the bloodstream and is utilized by that iron. And therefore, you can kill the bacteria, kill the cancer cells, and so forth develop. So the force in nature that animates the immune system is also the Obosom that wields iron and metal, and the Obosom that governs metal. So therefore, in our Akan culture, he's called the Obosom of fire and war and hot metal. He is also an iron or metal caster. And the term for to cast metal in the Akan language is gu. And the Ogufo are the group of people who cast metal. Gu. So the Heru Behudet or Bena in the Akan tradition is also Ogufo, one of the Ogu individuals. This is why Ogun also means war and so forth. In the Yoruba tradition, Ogu means the Obosom of war and metal and enforcing divine order in Vodoun and so forth, because it's the same divinity. The same divinity that we invoked in ancient Kamit and Khanit is the exact same force in nature that possesses our people as Akan, as well as Yoruba, Fon, and Ebe, and Igbo, as Ikenga, and Igbo, and so forth, and wherever Afro-Akani people are in the world, we still deal with the same force in nature, the same force in creation, the male force that operates the divine immune system. So this is Benada, and we give evidence of that in that particular text. Ben, also in the Akan language, means to become red by boiling, become hot, well cooked, thoroughly fired. When one becomes heated, one's skin sometimes and eyes sometimes often become red. If one's skin is burned, it often appears red. Yet to be well fired or well cooked, ben, as spoken in the Akan language, also describes one who is thoroughly tested, battle tested, well learned, well experienced, serious and focused, red-eyed, focused, and pinpointed accuracy, and so forth. Therefore, the term that is utilized for the English term professor in the Akan language will be Obenfo, one of the people fo who is ben, well cooked, thoroughly fired, well learned, battle tested, and so forth. Serious and focused. This is the kind of energy that we're dealing with. So then you also have the term Obeni in Akan, defined as one who is sent to attack the enemy. Bena, Beni, Ben meaning well fired, thoroughly fired, well cooked, battle tested, focused, serious, well-learned, and so forth. These are all attributes of a child of Bena, someone who is a Kwabena. So now we begin to understand the nature of the soul, the cry of Malcolm, and why he had that specific kind of spiritual disposition. This was something that was encoded within him before he was even born. And when he came into the world, he carried that kind of energy. We talked about his patriclan and his matriclan as manifest through his father and his mother. And they were both Pan-Africanists, fighting for freedom, fighting for justice, and so forth. Enforcing divine order by seeking to establish an independent Afro-Kaiti nation for all Afro-Kaiti people to function and live in an independent, sovereign condition, and defending that sovereignty without compromise. This is part of his blood circle. So when you look in the Akan tradition, you have the soul, the divine consciousness, which is like the apex of an ahinasa, a triangle. And at the bottom right and left corners, you have the patriclan and matriclan energy. You have Obosom that governs the patriclan, a divinity that governs the patriclan, that has protected your ancestresses and ancestors of your patriclan for thousands of years, and that energy is connected to you. You have a divinity that governs the matriclan, that has protected your matriclan ancestresses and ancestors for thousands of years. And when you come into the world through the agency of that individual, and you're connected to that Obosom as well. So you have the divinity that governs your soul, your divine consciousness, which is at the apex of the triangle. But then you also have the spiritual, quote-unquote, DNA of the mother, the spiritual DNA of the father. You have the sperm cell of the father and the ovum cell of the mother, but the energy that powers that sperm cell is a divinity in our Akan culture, has specific characteristics. The energy that governs the ovum cell, that animates that ovum cell in nature, a matriclan divinity, the Obosom, as we call in our Akan culture. So you don't only receive the DNA from the mother and certain characteristics physiologically from the mother, but the energy that animates that ovum cell is the same energy that is animated and protected the matriclan ancestresses and ancestors over the course of millennia, and the energy of that Obosom goes into your being. The energy that has animated the sperm cell and protected the patriclan ancestresses and ancestors for millennia. Not only do you receive the physical DNA of the father and take on some of his characteristics physiologically and certain kinds of behavioral characteristics, but because of the Obosom, the divinity, the Obosom, the father's divinity, that specific force, the Ntoro, as we call it in Akan, or the Obosom, you receive the spiritual disposition as well. So the spiritual disposition from the mother's clan divinity, the spiritual disposition from the father's clan divinity, they unite. And that blended energy in concert with the force in nature that governs your head creates a unique being. And when we talked about the kind of character of the mother and father coming from the background of the mother and father, the slave rebellion, Afro-Kaiti enslaved people who rose up and freed themselves from enslavement in the South, in the regions from where his father was from, and those who were enslaved in Grenada from where his mother was from, who waged war against the whites and offspring and took over Grenada for over a year. That kind of consciousness blending together, the matriclan and the patriclan energy, blending together to give birth to a being, Malcolm X, Kwabena, who carries that soul divine immunity. So now, this is where you get the name Kwabena and these different characteristics. Then we want to talk about the term Akosan, the name Akosan. In the Akan language and in the Akan culture, you'll hear about the term San Kofa. San means to return. Ko means go. And Fa means to grab. So San Kofa means return, go, and grab. So the Ebe, or the divine wisdom teaching, coming from the ancestresses and ancestors, say, well, where is the Nawo San Kofa Yin Chi, which means if you forget, or if your mind leaves you and you sankofa, return, go and grasp, then it is not hated. In fact, it is respected. It is expected and respected. If you forget and you return to your ancestral past to understand, it is not taboo. It is not a hateful thing. It is respected and expected, and we want you to return to your ancestral past. Sankofa. So when you talk about the name, such a name, Akosan, ko to go, sign to return. That term becomes a name. When we call Malcolm X Kwabena Akosan, we already talked about Kwabena Akosan means one who is gone and returned. Kosan. Now that term sometimes is utilized for a child who is recognized to be a specific ancestor or ancestress who has returned, somebody who died in the past, who's a great ancestor or a great ancestress who died in the past, and that spirit has returned. And we recognize who that spirit is, and the child is called Akosan, which means he has gone and he has returned. But Akosan has other implications as well, specifically dealing with Sankofa, returning, San to go, and Fa to grasp from our ancestral past as Afurakaini people. To solve the problems in the present, we go back to our ancestral past. We look at our civilization, our civilized society, our capacity to build and maintain civilizations and defend ourselves in our sovereignty and overcome our enemies. We look back to our civilization and extract from that Sanko Fa, grasp from that, and utilize that information to solve the problems that we have in the present, to overcome specific obstacles in the present. This is what such a name infers and implies. When we say Kwabena Akosan, we're talking about someone who's called sign, gone and returned. He went back to his ancestral past and drew from that energy, drew from that consciousness to solve problems in the present. The ancestral past, immediate ancestral past, is his patriclan and matriclan ancestresses and ancestors, those who were liberators in the Georgia region in the south from his father's side, and those who were liberators from Grenada from his mother's side. All of that ancestral energy informing young Malcolm from the time that he is born, urging his parents to participate in a Pan-African society, Pan-African movement, urging them to move forward to establish independence, looking at Africa for the Africans. So when you begin to listen to Malcolm X as he comes out of prison, begins to speak as a minister in the Nation of Islam and so forth, and as the years pass, he begins to focus on Afuraka, Afuraika. He focuses on that more so than many of the other individuals in the organization. While they're talking about the misinformation about the Asiatic black man and black people being born in Asia, which is totally inaccurate, even though he was part of that organization, he was also someone who studied truthery outside of that organization dictate. He was getting information from J.A. Rogers, for example, getting information from John Henry Clark, getting information from Joseph Ben Yakinen and many others, Arthur Schomburg and many others who were dealing with truthers, dealing with straight Afuraikaini truthers. So you'll often hear Malcolm talking about the black man in Africa when he was civilized in civilized society, and the whites and their offspring were in an inferior state all over Europe. He talks about the great civilizations going back thousands of years in Afuraka, Afuraika, even later in life, when he formulates the Organization for Afro-American Unity, when he connects with other Afuraikani, Afuraikaini leaders around the world. He's dealing with going back to Afuraka, Afuraika, and establishing independence of sovereign nation. He'll talk about in his famous quote, "You left something in Africa, you left your mind in Africa." He didn't say you left your mind in Asia. He was talking about leaving your mind in Africa. He was always talking about going back to that point. He was a quote-unquote Garveyite, like his father was a Garveyite, and his mother was the Garveyite from the beginning, through and through. He was seeded with that consciousness as a child, and throughout his career, quote unquote, with the nation, and afterwards, he was still pressing, in reality, the Garvey principle. But even before becoming a Garveyite, even before he came into the womb, he was already forged with that consciousness coming from his patriclan and matriclan ancestresses and ancestors, and the spirit, the divinity that governed his own crop. So this is the reason why we utilize that terminology, Kwabena Akosan. This is the way we refer to Malcolm X in the Akan language. In Akwamuman, Amaruka, Eti Akwamu Nation in North America is more properly fitting as a title. Of course, we don't utilize English names and so forth to recognize our people, ancestresses and ancestors, as well as our people just in general. We always seek to return San, Kofa, to Ko and Grass from our ancestral past and utilize that to bring balance to our situation right here. If you go further in our document dealing with Bena, we talk about Bena's primary function as the divine immune system, but that has direct correlation to divine order. When we talk about divine order, Nyamewaa-Nyame or Amenet-Amen, the divine plan, the divine arrangement. Divine order is comprised of two complementary poles. The expansive pole of order is divine law or love, because law and love is the same word in our ancient language. That is the expansive pole of order. The contractive pole of order is divine hate. So law or love and hate, the expansive and contractive poles of divine order. Through law, that we attract balance to our lives. Law is the instrument through which we attract and establish balance within our lives. The male and female forces of divine law is Ma'ah, or Ma'ah and Ma'at. The male force is Ma'ah, the female force is Ma'at. That's divine law. The male and female forces of divine hate are Bena and Abena, who are called Heru Behudet and Sechima or Sekhmet in ancient Kemet. Hate is the contractive pole of order. Law or love is the expansive pole of order. Through law, you incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities you need to incorporate in order to harmonize your thoughts, intentions, and actions with the divine order. It is through the law. So if you want to live in harmony with order, it is through law that you achieve that. Law is the instrument. As we've said in the past, if someone said place a certain number of letters in alphabetical order, in order to do so and achieve that order, you must recognize what are the laws that govern alphabetical order. The law is the expression of order. So we know B comes after A and C comes after B and so forth. So once you know the laws that express the order, the laws are the instruments that allow you to align with order. So law is the expression of order. It is the instrument through which you can align your thoughts, intentions, and actions with the order that you are trying to achieve. Hate is the impression of order. It is through divine hate that we reject, repel, hate, push away those thoughts, intentions, actions, things, objects, deeds we need to reject in order to restore balance to our lives and maintain balance within our lives. Hate is divine rejection. Through law, you accept order. Through hate, you reject order. Through law, you embrace order. Through hate, you repel disorder. So, when we talk about the immune system, that is the agent of the divine hate of the Supreme Being. The male and female forces, Bena and Abena, are the male and female forces of contraction, the impression of divine order, divine hate. The whites and their offspring want us to believe that hate is evil, hate is wrong, hate represents a low vibration of energy, hate is immature, that is pure nonsense, that's foolishness. is the means by which the whites and their offspring control When you embrace divine order, you must embrace the expansive and contractive pole, or else you're not embracing divine order. Law is the expansive pole, so when you want to align your thoughts, intentions, and actions with order, you must embrace divine law, and therefore you embrace things, objects, deeds, and entities that will assist you in your alignment with order. Order in and of itself is dealing with a specific manner in which things are to be done, a specific way, a specific manner. This is why it's order. And of course, disorder is a perversion of the order. So when you have an order, there are certain things that are accepted and certain things that are not. You have an order to your digestive system. There are certain things you can place in your system because of its order, because of its structure, because of the manner in which it was formed. And there are certain things that will create disorder within you that you should not place in your system. And if you do, you will create negative consequences because you're subverting the order of your digestive system. In the same way, there's an order that governs creation. Order and arrangement. Nyamewaa-Nyame, the divine order, the order or arrangement of the Supreme Being. There are things and objects, deeds, and entities that are in harmony with order, and there are things, objects, deeds, and entities that fall out of order and begin to subvert the order. It's like you have naturally healthy cells within your body, and they have a specific function. Your immune system cells serve immune functions. Your heart cells serve heart functions. Your liver cells serve liver functions. But if some of them become disordered and seek to subvert the order and become disfigured, now they are operating outside of the created order, and they become what are called cancerous cells. And if their development is not arrested and they are not destroyed and expelled, they will consume and destroy all of the healthy cells and destroy the body in and of itself. So you have an immune system that isolates those cancerous cells, destroys them, and expels them from the body to maintain the order. Order in and of itself is dealing with a certain manner in which things must be done. So therefore, you incorporate order through expressing law. You reject disorder through the impression of hate. So therefore, when you have a certain order, you imprint upon the created universe and the created entities within the universe the parameters within which they must operate. The order is the order, and it is imprinted by Benada and Abena, the male and female contractive forces of divine hate, the impression of order. When they stamp that divine order on creation, that also means they are stamping out disorder at the same time. Law is the expression of order. Hate is the impression of order. You'll find that Heru Behudet is also called Heru Keti. Ket is the term that became ket or chet or het or hate. In English, it comes directly from ancient Kamit. Just like in the Proto-Indo-European language family, which English derives from, you'll find that hate is derived from the Proto-Indo-European so-called root ket, which means to break or destroy or destruction. So that term ket in the Proto-Indo-European language file we show in our book, Amenet-Amen, Divine Law and Divine Hate, comes from the ancient term ket in ancient Kamit, which means to break or destroy. And it is also a title of Heru Behudet, a title of Bedat, a title of Bena. So he is the force of divine hate, divine destruction, destroying disorder and its purveyors in order to maintain the integrity of the divine order. So Bena is the divinity of divine hate, divine destruction. So when you have a Kwabena, you have someone who is a servant, Kwa, or subject Kwa of Bena. That means he upholds divine order. He's an enforcer of divine order. He's part of the divine immune system function. He seeks out disorder and destroys it. Pinpoint accuracy with fire and energy to burn up that disorder, and inspires through that fire to fire other people up because he has that fiery energy. We said Benada, the root is ben, meaning red, or to become red by boiling, to burn. That fiery energy of the red planet. Benada is the red planet. When you see the planet Bena, so-called Mars, it is called Heru Desher, the red planet, because it manifests that red fiery energy. And this is why it's called the planet of war as well, because the spirit Bena animates that planet just like he animates his children on earth. So when you see that red, fiery, pinpoint accuracy enforcer of divine order who would destroy disorder and its purveyors, whether in thought and word and speech as well as deed, you're dealing with a Kwabena, and you can see the characteristics all perfectly match Kwabena Akosan, Kwabena Akosan of Malcolm X, even with respect to the Red Heru, Heru Desher, the red planet. Of course, he was called Detroit Red. Part of that, of course, has to do with his, the coloring of his hair and so forth, but it also has to do with our ancient ancestral culture. We utilize that kind of terminology. Beyond notions of race mixing and so forth, we utilize the terminology. For example, someone being called Bere in Akan or Ben in Akan meaning ridden and so forth, fiery. But we also have the terminology Kaka, which means red in the Akan language, and Sunsum, which means black in the Akan language. You have some people, for example, in the Oyoko Abusia, the Oyoko clan, Matra clan in Akan culture, who are called the red Oyoko people, the Oyoko Kaka. But then you have the other people who are called the black Oyoko people or the Oyoko Sunsum. Neither one of the people are mixed. It's because of the spiritual disposition of the people. People who are governed by their patriclan or their matriclan is governed by the energy of an Obosom who carries that red, fiery energy that shows up not only in their disposition as fiery people, but it will also show up in their phenotype. So they will be dark brown people with red undertones. But then you have people who are Oyoko Tuntun, the black Oyoko people. They're still the same dark brown people, but they have black undertones, and they're connected with Obosom, or forces in nature who carry that earthy kind of energy, that cool magnetic energy, and it manifests not only in their character and their functioning, but it also manifests in their phenotype. The black and the red, so-called in the Akan tradition, goes back to ancient Kana, ancient Nubia, which is an ancient Akana civilization, or Akan civilization. Prior to our migration to West Afuraikai, we founded ancient Kana, a title of Nubia. Of course, when you look at the pottery in ancient Kanata Nubia, it's known for the red and black. It's called the red and black pottery, the red and black ware. But you look at the people, you see the quote-unquote red and the black. And then when you go into ancient Kemet as well, that same cosmology and that same understanding is applied. You have the Kamal, the black people, the Desheru, the red people. It's not just talking about the black land and the red land, the fertile black land with the black soil, the black silk, and the red land, meaning the red clay as well as the red desert. It's also talking about the divinities, the forces in nature that animate the black land, the spiritual force that animates and invigorates the black land, as well as the spiritual forces that animate and invigorate the red sand of the desert, as well as the red clay, just as in the red clay of Georgia. You have forces in nature whose sacred color is black because of the cool magnetic energy that they deal with, that they emanate. You have forces in nature like Benada and Abena and others whose sacred colors include red because of that fiery energy that they emanate and they dispense to their children. So their fiery energy manifests not only in the character of the people, but the phenotype as well. So that was true of ancient Kemet with the blacks and the reds. It's true of ancient Kanat, Nubia with the blacks and the reds. It's true in our Akan culture with the blacks and the reds, and it's true also in America because we still utilize that terminology. If someone is dark brown with black undertones, instead of saying tun, we'll say black, call the brother black, hey, what's up, black? Or if someone are dark brown with red undertones, we will call them red. But then later on, that same terminology is also applied to people who are quote-unquote red-boned or they have some mixture of their hair is light brown and so forth. But originally, even before any admixture. The dark brown people with red undertones, the dark brown people with black undertones, we still use that terminology. So this is all inclusive. It's ancestrally inherited. It cuts across thousands of years and our various migrations to different parts of the world. Okay, so for the individuals, if you're on the phone line, you have a question or a comment, hit the number 1. If you're in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat room. And you can create a username quickly in Blog Talk. Want to look through the chat room right quick to see. We saw a couple of comments before we move forward. And one of the comments says, I had to reread Amenet-Amen several times and listen to the archive videos to understand and change my bamboozled mind before I fully understood the concept of divine hate. And that is true for many of our people, simply because we've been made to believe falsely by the whites in our offspring that hate is evil. The reason we've been made to believe that because that is political ploy to keep our people from engaging the divine immune system that we are all connected to. Because we invoke Bena and we invoke Abena, we invoke the forces in nature that will stimulate us, motivate us to get up and rise up and exterminate the whites and their offspring, exterminate our enemies, men, women, and children, just as we did during enslavement and freed ourselves from enslavement and brought down the entire slave system in North America through the practice of ancestral religion, the revolts that were successful, that forced the whites and their offspring into the position of abolition and forced them into the position of accepting emancipation, is because we engaged and invoked the Obosom, the forces in nature that animate us and that deal with fire and war and so forth, and we were motivated by them to stand up and wage war and cut down our enemies, burn down plantations with that red fire, free our people from plantations, set up independent communities, independent nations, and defend those nations intergenerationally, and go back to plantations and raid the plantations and free more people and go back to the free territory. When you have that concept, that mindset, and you recognize through invoking Bena and Abena that every activity that you engage in while you were on the plantation, working enslaved in the distillery, or as a blacksmith, whatever you were doing, any interaction you engaged in with your people, you recognize you were behind enemy lines. So everything you did, any kind of information you exchanged, any kind of materials you exchanged, any kinds of thoughts and ideas you exchanged were in the context of utilizing that information ultimately for the liberation of the people and the extermination of the whites and their offspring. Just as that was true in the past, it is true today. We are still behind enemy lines until we establish our own independent nation on our own landmass, and we are secure in our sovereignty because we are defending our sovereignty that we have established. We are still behind enemy lines. And any communication, any exchange, whether it's economic or social or ritual or cultural or spiritual, any kind of communication that we have between one another, any kind of exchange we have between one another must be recognized to be taking place in the context of us operating behind enemy lines. So we must utilize all of our political and social and spiritual and military capital towards the liberation of our people every moment of every day, because every moment of every day we are still behind enemy lines. And of course, the whites and offspring recognize that they can remove the consciousness of divine hate from the people. They're removing your immune system from you. The direction of Bena and Abena, when you get filled with that fullness, that power, fire of divine hate, and you seek to destroy the disorder and its purveyors, if that is removed from you, that's no different than somebody compromising your immunity. And if your immune system is compromised, then any weak white entity, weak bacteria can enter into your system and take you down. As we've spoken of before, white grains of salt are weak. They're ineffective. They have no power. They're not intelligent. But if you seek to incorporate them or integrate them into your system, and they don't belong in your system, you keep flooding your system with these white grains, these little individual, weak, ignorant whites, and you force your system to accept them when your system is fighting against you, forcing them in. And initially, your body begins to fight. You keep forcing the white grains in your system, your body is fighting against that and attempting to build up what is misinterpreted as a tolerance, but in reality it's not tolerating them, it is fighting against them. But as long as your immune system is fighting, but you're fighting your immune system because you're seeking integration with the white, then those weak, wayward, ignorant grains that have no power will eventually overpower you. Your ankles will swell, you develop high blood pressure and so forth, and eventually become bedridden. Now the weak white, because of a policy of integration that you embraced, and you did not embrace your natural inclination for divine hate or rejection, now you have been subdued by the whites, who are actually weaker than you. The whites and their offspring understand that not only physiologically, and they wage chemical and biological warfare with our people, whether it's genetically modified foods or in many other facets, but they also recognize that socially. They had to burn that into the brains of our people through pseudo-religion. They recognize when we embraced ancestral religion, we were motivated to wage war against the whites and their offspring, and that is what brought down the slave system, not only in North America, but also in the Caribbean and South America and Central America and so forth. So therefore, they recognize that they must move forward and seek to incorporate in the minds of our people pseudo-religion, so that we will become docile, enslaved people, and eventually people who are, quote-unquote, emancipated from enslavement, but still docile individuals who would not seek to fight back against the whites and their offspring, these cancerous cells. So they had to place within that fake religion the false notion that hate is evil. In reality, hate is divine. It is your immune system. To reject hate is to reject your immunity and set yourself up for perpetual domination by your enemy. Malcolm X, Kwabena Akosan, in reality understood that. He lived that, he had that fire within him, even though the doctrine that he was given was corrupt, and sometimes he misspoke based on that corrupt doctrine. But the energy in his spirit, as Kwabena is the divinity of divine hate, and when he was on his game in reality, when he was on his focus, you felt that energy coming from him. And that same energy governed various Afro-Kaini people throughout the community, children of Bena as well as children of Abena and so forth. And every Afro-Kaini person, no matter what Obosom, what Orisha Voodoo, that governs your soul, your divine consciousness, your cry, your krawa, and so forth, you have a role within the liberation of our people. Your immune system and your lymphatic system may be directly fighting against the cancerous cells, but your circulatory system, your digestive system, your integumentary system are all supportive of that functioning. Every system has a role against disorder. Every system has a role to play with regard to the restoration of order within the great divine body, within your physical body, within the great divine body of the Supreme Being, within the body of the Afro-Kaini community as a whole. So we want to go through, we saw a few more comments in the chat room. Want to make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room. And of course, if you have a question on the phone line, you can hit the number 1 so we can see your hand is raised. Okay, and one of the comments in the chat room, I understand hate, and I'm glad to find. Hold on 1 second. Want to make sure we didn't miss that part. Glad to find out that I had been trying to suppress what I've been trying to suppress anyway is divine, which is very often causes problems for our people physically, spiritually, as well as physically. When you begin to suppress the natural fire within your immune system, because the white snare offspring told you that hate is wrong, that fire within your spirit body you begin to suppress, and then you begin to implode, and you're fighting against yourself, because within your own crowd you're being directed to express divine order and impress divine order, to embrace divine law or love, and to impress divine order through divine hate. And when you manifest that in a harmonious fashion, then you're told by the white snare offspring and their proxies within our community, including some of our own relatives and teachers and everybody else, that your expression and impression is wrong and evil and you need to suppress it. And then some of our people begin to suppress these feelings and start beginning to question themselves and saying, what is wrong with me? Why do I have this divine fire against these spirits of disorder? Why do I have hatred for them? When in reality, it's divine. That's like your immune system cell being told by some cancerous cells and some bacteria, some foreign bacteria that enters the body, why are you always, immune system cells, why are you always seeking to kill the other cancerous cells? You need to get along. You need to stop seeking to kill people all the time. You need to stop being so angry and so fiery. You're going to burn yourself out. That's insane. Of course, the bacteria would seek to send that kind of message to stop the movement of the immune system cells so the bacteria can take over the entire body. The bacteria in the black body of our community are the white snare offspring. They are the cancerous cells within the divine great black body. They have a temporal existence, just like the cancerous cells, 1 out of every 100,000 cells in your body becomes cancerous at any given time. They have a temporal existence because the immune system cells stamp them out. The cancerous cells within the body of black humanity are the white and their offspring. White Europeans, white Asians, white Hindus, white Hispanics, white Latinos, Latinas, white Arabs, white pseudo-Native Americans who are just Asian. These are the white and their offspring, cancerous cells within the great black body. But they have a temporal existence when we awaken. They can no longer suppress and oppress us when we awaken. We destroy them when we awaken and take our independence back and our sovereignty back when we awaken, when we embrace the fullness of divine order, which is law and hate. But we never fall for that foolishness any longer, that our immune response is actually evil. In reality, it is what maintains order in creation. The world comes into being through law, and it is sustained through hate. Law is the expression of order, and the world unfolds according to the laws that express that order. But the world is maintained through the impression of order, meaning maintained through hate. Anything that would seek to subvert the order of creation is stamped out by Heru Behudet and Sechima. The world comes into being through law and is sustained through hate. If you cut off divine hate or seek to do so, you're cutting yourself off of half of divine order. And that's what the white snare offspring would like us to do internally, mentally. And then it causes us to become depressed, begin to implode physically, becoming stressed and so forth, not because we're engaged in hate, because we're suppressing that fire. If you suppress fire, then you cause yourself problems. People who are engaged and expressing law and impressing hate, it's light as a feather. There's no such thing as stress when you utilize and manifest divine hate. The only time you manifest stress is when you're engaged in activities you should not be engaged in and you're seeking outcomes that you don't end up receiving. And then you become frustrated and depressed and so forth and full of stress. But when you embrace divine order, it's light as a feather. Your immune system is not causing stress within your body when it's killing cancerous cells. Your immune system is freeing your body by destroying cancerous cells. Hate is not enslaving your body. Hate is freeing your body from enslavement, because if the cancer cells were able to proliferate, then they would enslave your body. So don't let any fools who call themselves spiritualists, cultural, psychologists, psychiatrists, priests, priestesses try to convince you that hate is evil or weak or immature. Hate is divine. And we have proven that through our publication, Amenet-Amen, but it is proven, of course, in reality through dealing with the actual forces of divine hate, Bena and Abena, who we directly communicate with this Afurakani peace. These same forces in nature possess our people doing rituals today, wherever we are in the world, including in North America. That's nothing to do with initiation. As we show with Baba, with Malcolm X, Nana, Kwabena Akosan, he came into the world assigned this divinity, pre-incarnation, and came into the world with this force in nature already assigned to his head region. So we come into the world with these forces in nature assigned to us, and then we express what is already encoded within us. Nobody can give us forces in nature. Nobody can give us divine energy other than the Supreme Being, and that happens before we even get into the womb. So we're going to take a phone call. Ichiawo on the phone line number 2843. You got a question or a comment?
Yes, Makiawo. I've been reading and studying about the different kradins, and I'm an educator, so I'm in and out of several different schools, and especially at the elementary level. So sometimes when we're coming to the table to discuss certain children, and our young black children, especially the black boys, you know, teachers will come, especially the white teachers, will come to the table and call our boys aggressive, physical, oppositional, defiant, all of these awful names. But as I've been studying the different Obosoms and the kradins, I begin to see it makes a lot of sense, because there's some little boys, they have real fiery or spirited dispositions or personalities, you know, and I call them spirited children, but as I'm reading, I'm beginning to understand the soul of these children. And then, so what we do is, you know, they become a problem, quote unquote, within the school, within the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's flip this. So our kids are called aggressive, oppositional, defiant. Okay, so let's go to the little white children or the little Hispanic boys. Those children, from my experiences, you know, teachers come to the table, oh, he's very assertive. I'm trying to think of something else. He's not oppositional defiance. He has an other health impairment, you know. So what kind of saddens me is that our young black teachers, I'm talking about the young black female teachers, have bought into the medications. I can't do anything with them. They don't want to hear about how you channel this energy or how you channel this spirit. Or the parents also, and most of them, you know, I'm not putting down single mothers, but I guess they have so much on their plates too. They are doing the same thing, coming to school like you saw on TV, whipping their children in front of the class, in front of these little white teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I just wanted to make the comment on that. And what I try to explain to the black teachers, you know, that these are children where you have to channel that energy in a different way. There's a different, you know, if we come from a different set of genes, et cetera, but we don't, I guess it goes back to the Sankofa. We don't even understand our own selves, you know, and what dictates what. Thank you.
Absolutely. And in fact, we appreciate that, because what they do, of course, the whites in our offspring understand the differences between spiritual disposition and character within our people. They recognize that some of our children are children of fiery Obosom. They understand that. They recognize that. They know that they don't have that, but they know that we do. And it is those children, males and females, who are children of fiery Obosom, who are those in the past who will be the ones who will wage war against the enslavers, those in the past who will wage war during the Jim Crow era and kill Ku Klux Klan members as opposed to petitioning and marching. It will blow these crackers' brains out. So those are the same ancestresses and ancestors who have returned. So the whites and their offspring speak out the Kwabena and the Abena and the Kwesis and Akoswias and Yaos and Yas and Abas and so forth. They look for those individuals who manifest that kind of character early on. And then they seek to isolate them in special education and so forth, so that, of course, they will have a negative experience. They will typically drop out of school, and all of the Kwabenas, Abenas, Kwesis, Akoswias, Yao Yas, and Abas, the fiery ones, will be the ones who end up on the streets or end up in jail, and all the ones who have a less fiery disposition are those individuals who will still be out free in society. They seek to lock up the liberators before they get a chance to fulfill their potential, so they identify them early on. That's the nature of these pseudo-diagnoses, and of course the medication designed to disrupt neurotransmitters and so forth in the brains of Afurakani people. All of that is by design. This goes back to enslavement, when they recognized the differences between the people. They recognized, for example, that they had to begin to outlaw the drum. Why would they outlaw the drums on plantations if ancestral religion was meaningless? Because they recognized that because of the drum, that would stimulate our people to begin to invoke the Obosom, and we would rise up and begin to massacre the whites and our offspring. So anything that had to do with ancestral culture, they sought to suppress. Replace that with the pseudo-fake religion of Christianity and began to look for different ways, chemically, through foods and so forth, as well as socially, to identify those who might become an Okumpo Yao, a warrior Yao, a Nat Turner, or Okupo Kwabena of Denmark Visu, or Kwabena Akosan of Malcolm X. They would seek to find him early on. They sought to reroute Malcolm X when he was a young man and say, well, listen, you could never be a lawyer, as of course he spoke about in his autobiography. They would seek to reroute them and direct them away from any kind of development so they could end up in the streets and end up in jail. So they seek those out. The same thing when you look at ancient Kemet with Heru and Heru Behudet, and they're fighting against the enemy together, and they destroy the enemy. As the Herus and the Heru Behudet, the Yaos and the Kwabenas, the whites and offspring are always looking for the children of Yah, the children of Kwabena or Bena, the children of Awusi and so forth, so that they can silence them. Now we do have, and many of our, people who are teachers and so forth, as you said, they don't understand that reality because they've been so conditioned themselves and brainwashed themselves, they couldn't conceive that this is all part of the same, what they call school to prison pipeline. But we do have a method by which, whether it's teachers as well as human services agents, social workers and psychologists, psychiatrists and so forth, a method by which you can teach them how to incorporate culture with their students as well as with clients of their therapists and so forth, incorporate culture in a harmonious fashion for young people as well as older people who've never been introduced to culture and have never even been interested or believe that they're not interested at all. We have a method by which you can incorporate that. When you look on the Sankofa Juma, we have a separate website, sankofajuma.com. It's Sankofa, Sankofa. Juma is DWUMA.com. It's all one word, sankofajuma.com. We have the video of a training that we've done with human services professionals, human services professionals, to utilize our journal, the Nyamewaa Whole Life Journal, in that process, and we convey what it is physical soundness and spiritual soundness rooted in culture, reconstructing life based on culture, so you can get to those clients, whether they're diagnosed with these pseudo-diagnoses, whether they're Axis 1 diagnoses as adults, or oppositional defiant disorder, and these different things that the children are diagnosed with. there are means by which you can reach the children. The methods that we utilize, we have a methodology called the Apura Whole Life Interventions Model. You see that on the website. We also use the Nyamewaa Whole Life Journal. And we use that information and we utilize that therapeutic model to incorporate that information in a fashion where young people as well as adults are receptive. So you can download the book itself. You can download the Apura Whole Life Interventions Model as well as the 2-hour video, the training video on how to implement that model with youth as well as adults. And then we also did a broadcast on that as well, the Sankofa Juma broadcast. So people have used that to great effect to reach what people will call at-risk or, quote-unquote, aggressive or difficult children. But we utilizing culture in a targeted and harmonious fashion, you can reach them directly. And you can train teachers to do the same thing.
I've looked at those documents that you have posted on the website, and I do use bits and pieces of it. I only, have a little short amount of time with the children that I see, but whatever little bits or pieces that I can use, it always brings a smile to them. If I say something positive or give them an ancestor's name and give them a little personality trait or tell them they are something, et cetera, et cetera. It feeds their soul. Now, I just have one more comment. As you know, the Hispanic population, the public schools are beginning to have a large population of Hispanic students. But what concerns me is when you walk into the schools and during their morning exercises, I'm talking about in schools that are predominantly black. So now the principals are having everything read in Spanish or said in Spanish. But, there's nothing, you walk into school, there's nothing about black history or African history on the walls, or they're not speaking the Twi language or anything. And now I asked an administrator, I said, isn't it somewhat strange that you speaking in Spanish, et cetera, but yet you're not teaching anything the Twi language or some form of African language or saying it in whatever you have to say in the African way? And she said, well, we have a Hispanic population who don't understand. I'm saying, but black children, they may not be able to relate to that language. But anyway, it's always an excuse. But sometimes I say things because I just want to, bring a little bit of consciousness about what's actually going on, if that makes sense.
Right. Exactly. And on one hand, you bring that information up if you are in a position where you can start some kind of program or this extracurricular, there you can do that as well. But then also the key, of course, is establishing something outside of the school, whether it's something, an after-school program or something on Saturday, some kind of Saturday or a Sunday day program, or even certain events, cultural events and things like that, where children and parents can come out and, engage in something based around the culture. And if they know you and they've, had some positive experiences with you, and then you let them know we're going to be doing something outside of school. And very often parents, especially some of the parents you talked about who have a lot on their plate, if there's some event or some activity where they can take their children, that helps them to give them somewhat of a break, and at the same time you can infuse them with certain things. And all it takes is 15, 20 minutes to give them some information in a way that's agreeable to them, that they can digest it, and that in and of itself can transform their entire focus.
Yes, and that's a very good idea, and I'm going to utilize that. Madase.
And we appreciate that call. So when we talk about we have our regular website, ODWIRA.com, but then you also see a link on the ODWIRA.com website to our other website, Sankofa Juma, and that's the piece where we show we have a specific model, the Apura Whole Life Interventions model, based on the movements of the sun, where we incorporate ancestral culture and so forth, utilizing our Nyamewaa Whole Life Journal, and we've utilized it in the field of behavioral health and foster care and so-called at-risk youth, as well as adults who are, have Axis 1 diagnoses and so forth, to great effect. So there are ways to get to our people utilizing our own ancestrally inherited culture, positive inherited cultural values, showing people that these things are innate within them and assist them in discovering that within themselves so they can show examples within their own life and they've manifested these principles. And the manner in which we go through that process, there's always an awakening, even for individuals who initially thought that they hated anything African. And they begin to realize that they never hated anything Afurakani, Afurakaiti. What they hated was the misinformation that they were giving, purportedly representing what is quote-unquote African, which was always inaccurate. But when they received real information, then they always, 100% of the time, embrace it. Okay, so we want to make sure we didn't miss anything else in the chat room as we go through the comments. Okay, so and some of the people came in a little bit later, so what we were dealing with when we talked about the name we utilized for Malcolm X, Kwabena Akosan, talked about the nature of that name, the provenance of the spirit of the individual, the kind of energy he was born into the world with, Kwabena meaning a child of Bena and so forth, Akosan, he who is gone and returned, but also going back to return, to retrieve from our ancestral past and utilizing that information to solve our problems in the present. And of course, Malcolm, even though he was initially with the Nation of Islam and so forth, you notice the departure he makes consciously, intellectually, is often focusing on Afurakani, civilization, re-establishing a civilization on the continent, independent nation on the continent, dealing with Pan-Africanism, various leaders on the continent and so forth, organization of Afro-American unity, various things dealing with Pan-African and Black nationalism and so forth. This has to do with that notion of Akosan, going and returning and taking the information from our ancestral past and utilizing it for the present to solve our problems in the present. So this is what we are dealing with. Now, in that regard, also, the caller talked about education. And we have our 3 shows on a weekly basis. On Wednesdays, our Wukuda or Kuada, we have Egua Marketplace, and that show is tomorrow as well. We will be having our guest, Dr. Samori Kamara, who is the founder of Kamali Academy. So they're dealing with Afurakani, Afurakaiti, homeschooling, develop great curriculums for homeschooling parents and so forth. But even if you're not homeschooling now or as of yet, you can still utilize that curriculum for your children, just even on, after school and weekends and so forth, to strengthen them in their knowledge of who they are and the approach that we utilize to mathematics, the approach we utilize to science, the approach we utilize to various disciplines. Of course, when you deal with real African-centered education, you will find that those children are far above the national averages with regard to various fields of endeavor. They're scoring higher, they're more grounded, they're more rooted, and they're more, quote-unquote, successful, not only in elementary school and high school, but on to, quote-unquote, higher education. So we are going to have Dr. Samori Kamara on tomorrow for Egua Marketplace. He'll be sitting with us talking about Kamali Academy, and that is part of our Ogun economic development model operation. Of course, when Kwabena Akosan or Malcolm X talked about Black nationalism, that included economics and dealing with the economics in our own community and us supporting our businesses and organizations and institutions in our own community. And he brought that consciousness consistently to bear. Even though some of our people were dealing with that on a certain level because of the indoctrination of Christianity and white culture and self-hatred and so forth, our people began to fall away from supporting Black business and speaking only to identify with our enemies, with the open enemies, the whites and their offspring. So, of course, he's constantly bringing that pressure back on, bearing that on the minds of our people to return to political independence, economic independence, social interaction in a harmonious fashion with Afro-Akani people. So when we published our Okom economic development model. We talked about Okom economic development from an Afro-Akani ancestral religious perspective, and what it takes spiritually for our people to realign ourselves with reality. And once we realign ourselves spiritually, then we are naturally inclined towards engaging economics in a harmonious fashion. And once we engage that process, all we need is a strategy that's effective, redistribute the funds that we utilize. So our strategy is to starve the beast and feed the pride. So you can go to our Okom economic development page. You can download the Okom economic development model that we published, and you can study that. We also have a 4-part series that we did on Okom economic development. On the model itself, and we delineate the various aspects of the model and show how they apply to every aspect of life. And we also have Equakodi economic warfare, which is a broadcast we did dealing with the notion of us operating behind enemy lines and how every spending of resources, every distribution of resources is a strike against the enemy. So every time you spend money, that is a strike. This is economic warfare. We are behind enemy lines day in and day out. So any form of exchange, any form of activity, any form of cultural exchange or economic exchange, political activity amongst one another, we must recognize this is taking place within the context of being behind enemy lines, so everything must be used for the liberation of our people ultimately. So we have that broadcast as well. We also have the broadcast No Kwadefo, Ne Amambre, self-employment and ancestral culture. We talk about self-employment, self-dealing with your divine consciousness, the function you came into the world to execute. You align yourself with that, and the energy you have been given to execute that function, you utilize your consciousness to employ your own energy to serve that function in the world that is self-employment. And then that begins to extend from you internally to externally. You use that same consciousness to formulate an occupation, formulate an entrepreneurial endeavor, and support Afro-Akani businesses, institutions, and organizations. Self-employment. So we have a broadcast dealing with that. So you can download the Okom Economic Development Model. You can download those 4 videos, and then you'll see the list of businesses. We are targeting one business organization or institution per week for 52 weeks. We're already on week number 15. You'll see the list of those various businesses we've asked the community to support through starving the beast and feeding the pride. You make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds you would have potentially wasted with the whites and their offspring, and you reallocate those funds, starve that beast, and reallocate them to the business of the week. Make a donation to that business or purchase their products and or services. Take that $5 away from Starbucks, $5 away from McDonald's or CVS, and reallocate that money to the business of the week. If 1,000 people, of course, took that $5 that they would have spent at Starbucks and starved the beast and fed the pride, then that would be a $5,000 infusion of capital to a black business so they can maintain their business, keep that business open, expand their services and products to us, and employ our people so that they can serve us at a greater capacity and employ themselves and take care of their families at the same time. If we do not do this, then by default, we are feeding the beast and starving ourselves. So starve the beast and feed the pride. That is our Okom economic development model operation. And again, we are on week number 15, and we have that list of businesses, and it is an ever-growing list of businesses. So by the end of 52 weeks, we will have tangibly supported at least 52 Afro-Akani businesses, organizations, and institutions. Not developing or seeking out a new source or additional source of revenue for utilizing the revenue, the funds that we already have, and properly allocating them, reallocating them, starve the beast and feed the fry. Okay, so there's another question in the chat room. There are 42 days in an Akan month. How come there isn't an Ntoro Obosom for each day of the month? In reality, there are, because the 7 days, the 42-day month, the Adadria 9, or the cycle of quote-unquote 40 days, or the 42-day cycle, is really a 6-week cycle. And of course, 6 sets of 7-day week, and then 6 sets of 7 days, which is 42 days. So of course, that 7-day week is a cycle. We talk about the natural cycle of the movement of the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies in position every 7 days, but then that is also tied to our biological cycle. And of course, this is the superstructure that governs all Akan activity, and we've been doing this for thousands of years. Recently, the whites and Australians have come up with a concept that they call or label chronobiology. And they talk about the circa-septon cycle. It talks about a cycle that occurs every 7 days and it affects various cycles within the body. It has to do with the blood pressure and the heartbeat and hormone levels and the red blood cell count and oral temperature and these different things that rise and fall within the 7-day cycle or circa-septon cycle. That same circa-septon cycle is connected to the natural cycle of Earth that we deal with the Obosom that govern the 7 days. So every 7 days is governed by these 11 Obosom that goes across the entire 42-day calendar. But in addition to those 11 Obosom, male and female Obosom, there are other Obosom as well that are associated with these different days. That includes the Obosom of the Patriclan that we talked about when we talked about Malcolm's father, the energy, the Obosom from his Patriclan that went into his, not only his physical DNA, but also to his spiritual DNA and his spiritual disposition coming from the father's side, as well as the Obosom associated with the Matriclan. And not only did he receive the Matriclan DNA from his mother and certain characteristics, but the energy that animates that Ogun, spiritual disposition and character of that force in nature also affecting him as well, his spiritual disposition. We talked about those, the Obosom of the Matriclan and Patriclan also have their days as well within that 42-day cycle. In reality, within the 7-day cycle, but of course repeated through that 42-day cycle as well. So the various Obosom in creation are all assigned and connected to these Obosom of the 7 days of a week as well. So, and we're going to be putting out some more information very soon dealing with that 40-day calendar. Okay, made out there for that question. All right. So we only have a few minutes left in the broadcast. So we want to say Yedase for tuning in to this special broadcast dealing with Nana Kwabena Akosan, Malcolm X. Some of the individuals came in a little bit later, so when you go back to the beginning of the program, you'll get some of the more detailed information we just wanted to show from an Akan perspective, the nature of the character of Malcolm X, the provenance of his spirit, that spirit that he came into the world with, that fiery energy that he was born with that was assigned to him, and why he came into the world moving in that fashion. And just as he has that spiritual character, that spiritual disposition that informs the manner in which he moved, in the same fashion, our people, Afurakani males, Afurakani females, all of us come up under the governance of one of the Obosom, one of the Orisha, one of the Vodoun, and so forth, that governs our soul, our divine consciousness, our Krawa. And when we align with that force in creation, we recognize our function in creation, how to manifest that function in creation in a harmonious fashion without creating disorder in the process, and the spiritual power, the potency that we have been given to execute that function. Okay, we have one more call on the phone line. Chiawo on the phone line. You had a question or a comment?
My question, in terms of what the Achiwatifo instilled of, they call heaven or heaven. What was the depictions on the wall that shows the hourglass, the scale and the feather? Is that a form of what they call heaven that they stole and tried to present to their perspective of heaven? That's my question.
No, you said the hourglass on the wall?
No, I mean, I was saying, like, their interpretation of heaven. Like, you know, the Achiwa talk about there's something in the so-called pie in the sky, the haven. And I wonder if they got that from what they found in the pyramid, and they come to their rationalization of what they term as what they call heaven, that they came up with this word heaven, that they try and still taught some of our people about when you die, you go to this place and this nonsense. That's my question.
Right, definitely. So, yes, when they, for example, when they see the female Obosom Newt, and before I finish, just want a programming note, there's 3 minutes left in the broadcast as far as online. So if you would like to listen beyond 11 o'clock, and we'll only probably go a few minutes beyond 11 o'clock, but if you want to listen beyond 11 o'clock, you must call in within the next, actually, 2.5 minutes to be on the phone line, because only the people on the phone line will be able to hear after 11. So you got about 2.5 minutes to call in. 657-383-0635. 657-383-0635. 657-383-0635. You have about 2 minutes to call in, because the people who are just online won't be able to hear any longer. Only the people who are on the phone line will be able to hear. All right, so so when you see the Obosom Newt, who's bent over the sky Obosom Newt, who's bent over the divinity, the male divinity Geb, who's the Obosom, the male divinity of the crust of the earth, and Geb and Newt, the crust of the earth and the sky, give birth to Alsar and Alset and Set and Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, physiologically and geologically, you have Alsar, the black soil substance, and Alset, the river waters, and Set, the red earth, and Nebuchadnezzar, the rain waters of earth, and so forth. So earth and sky give birth to those entities. But of course, you see in the body of Newt, you see the various Sebal, or stars. So when you also see the stars, you also see an association with the stars, with the ancestresses and ancestors, the Nananom Nsamanto, the Aku, or Akut, which is the title of the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of ancient Kemet. They're called the shining ones, or the illuminated ones, the ones who live in harmony with divine order. And so when the boat of Ra sails through the sky, the shining ones are connected with the boat of Ra and so forth. They're associated with the stars, not in the sense that we come from the stars, that's nonsense the white offspring seeks to inject into our culture, but we're talking about those spiritual entities. When one is an illuminated one or a shining one, so to speak, then it's simply talking about someone who has aligned their Ba, which we call Bra in Akan culture, with their Ka, which we call the Kra in Akan culture. So the Ba and the Khan Kemet is the Bra and the Kra in the Akan tradition. When they align the Ba and the Ka, that's the divine living energy, the spirit, connected with the soul, divine consciousness, and when there's an alignment there, the person becomes an Aku, we call Ehunhun, that one who is conscious, quote unquote. The Aku is the physical seat of the Aku in the body, is the pineal gland, that is the shrine for the Aku, the divine intelligence, divine wisdom, the application of knowledge and so forth. So a person who is illuminated, who can see, quote unquote, one who's lived in harmony with divine order, and their thoughts, intentions, and actions manifest divine order on a consistent basis, they become someone who has a vibrant spirit, a powerful spirit. Their aura is bright and vibrant. Their kahaibit is bright and vibrant, as opposed to weak and dark and murky and so forth. So they're considered an Aku or Aku, an illuminated one or shining one. So when one sees them clairvoyantly, when you see your ancestor or ancestress in the home and so forth, the ones who are more, in alignment with order, are more vibrant. It's like you have a magnet with a very strong field, an expansive magnetic field, or you can have an object that has a very small electromagnetic field. Someone who has a great deal of energy, just like the magnetosphere of Earth extends beyond the Earth, but of course the magnetosphere of the Sun extends, much further. When someone has substance and they're utilizing their energy in a harmonious fashion, and they're in alignment with divine order, their magnetic field and their kahibit, their so-called aura, their kahibit is strong and vibrant and powerful, and they're an aku. And the same is true of someone on earth when they have a quote-unquote sunsum yaduru, or their spirit is heavy and strong and powerful. They have a strong electromagnetic output, and people can feel their energy and they're strong and vibrant. And people can feel their spirit as opposed to someone who's very weak and sickly and so forth. They have a very weak aura that's very closer to their body and so forth, and not very vibrant at all. So those stars are associated with the aku, the illuminated ones, or illumined one, quote-unquote, shining one in the quote-unquote heavenly realm. When you see the quote-unquote Milky Way, in our Akan culture, which in ancient Kemet is called Hap-Ur, or the Great Heavenly Nile, the heavenly river of stars and so forth. In our Akan culture, that's the gateway, the pathway that's illumined by the Samanfo to the ancestral realm and so forth. In ancient Kemet, when they talk about Ra creating the Sekhet Hetep, the divine field of peace, for those who follow Tahuti or divine wisdom on earth, then they are given the divine field of peace, meaning the ancestral realm. And then the stars, the Aru and the divine food placed in the divine field of peace. When we read the book of the Heavenly Cow, so-called destruction of mankind, and Ra is establishing the ancestral realm and fills the ancestral realm with the stars and so forth. This is where that information comes from. It comes from that entire doctrine and that symbolism of the stars being associated with the illumined ones, the ancestresses and ancestors in the ancestral realm, and then the stars in the body of the sky divinity Nu.
Thank you for answering that question. I just wanted to clear. Madase.
Okay, Yeni, I'll say that. We appreciate the call. Okay, so just want to make sure we didn't miss anything. Okay, and yet I say we thank you for the comments in the chat room. For individuals who are new to the information, of course, we have published 16 books. The ebook versions of all of our books are free downloads from our website. So you can go directly to the Nhoma page on our website, NHOMA, the publications page, download the 16 books, including the information as far as Amenet-Amen, divine law and divine hate, that we dealt with tonight. We also have our page, kradin, Obosom, dealing with all of the Obosom, the forces of nature that govern the 7 days of the week, including Benada, the Obosom that governs Kwabena Akosan and Malcolm X. We have that article as well as the video and broadcast dealing with that as well. We also sell the soft cover versions of our books. The ebook versions are free. That is these are the entire books, full books for free. But then we also print out the soft cover versions in-house and in color on our own printers. We do our own publishing, writing, distribution, and so forth in-house. We don't contract that out. Our books range between $8 and $11. So if you would like to support the work that we are doing, of course you can share the free books with everybody on your social media networks and so forth. But you can, if you would like to purchase the books, you can do that as well. That assists us in the work that we are doing. Any order of 10 books or more is automatically 30% off. So sometimes people will order the first 10 books, and that's $66 for the first 10 books as opposed to $96 because it's 30% off. Some people will order the entire 16-book set, but anything over 10 books is 30% off. We also have our FECU study groups page. So when you go to the FECU page on our website, this is talking about the establishment of Nanasom FECU, Apurakani, Apurakaidi Ancestral Religion Study Group. We have a curriculum that we recommend. So you can start a study group independently, of course, with one or more people, whether you do it in person or online. This is the way to begin to institutionalize authentic Afurakani ancestral religion, culture, and nation building. We talk about ancestral culture from an authentic perspective, ancestral religion and cosmology from authentic perspective, Afurakani revolution and resolution from an authentic perspective, which is key to Ama ancestral and nation building. So we have this curriculum. The first book in the curriculum is the Kuku Tuntun, the Ancestral Jurisdiction, and then followed by the other books for those who want the softcover versions of the book. If you form a FECU, a study group with one or more people, of course, you automatically receive the 30% off just because you're part of a study group that you've established. So you'll see the details there, and we also have a broadcast where we talked about FECU, an institutional path to eradicating institutionalized oppression. So we did an entire broadcast on the FECU institutional path to eradicating institutionalized oppression. You can download that broadcast on that page as well as the curriculum and the formation of FECU. We also have our separate social media network, afuraka-afuraikai.ning.com, which is separate from Facebook and all the other private network we own and pay for, so we can have our own group. People can begin to interact, exchange information. We're studying the same, information. You also connect with other people around the world, our people, of course, only, who are studying the same information, who have established FECU study groups in their different areas. We post blogs and videos and discussions and everything else in that form. It's similar to Facebook. You can create a profile and so forth. afuraka-afuraikai.ning.com. We will be placing information with regards to the cities that we will be in. We just released that video. Wamukasa, public speech as a service to the Afuraikai community, talking about our philosophy behind Wamukasa, which is public speech in Akan. Of course, when we go to different areas, we do not charge a speaker's fee to organizers of lectures and events in different cities, and we do not allow the people to be charged either who are coming to hear our presentations. And in addition to that, we always give away a copy of one of our softcover books to everyone who attends the event. When we do a presentation in a city, it's Afuraikai people only, of course, who are allowed to come. Everyone receives one of our books for free. You are not charged an admission to come in. And when we are organizing the event, we do not charge a speaker's fee for those who are organizing the event. We also have a program with regard to that for individuals who would like us to come out to your city or your region and so forth. The only expense that sometimes may need to be covered is the travel expense, unless it's somewhere close to where we are and we drive out to those places. But outside of that, the only thing that the organizers would have to cover simply is the travel expense. And we seek out discounted travel expenses, of course, flights and so forth, for that purpose. But the model that we have put into place, a workable model for you to be able to cover those expenses, we typically try to find the cheapest flights through Travelocity or Expedia, services like that. The way to cover those expenses, you can become distributors on a short-term basis or long-term, it's up to you, of our soft-cover publications. We already have the No Quadripo distributor program in place for any Afuraikai person who would like to begin to work immediately. You can sell our books. You purchase them wholesale for 30% off, and then, of course, you sell them retail. So all of our books range between $8 and $11. So, of course, a $10 book, you purchase 30% off with the $7, and you sell it for $10 to make $3 for every book you sell. We already have a few individuals just doing that just to generate income for themselves, whether they're unemployed right now or just want additional income. Any Afuraikai person, no matter what your work history is, if you would like to work and begin to employ yourself and empower the community at the same time with accurate information, whether it's on holistic health, culture, spirituality, revolution, resolution, nation building, and so forth. This is what our publications deal with. You can begin to work immediately. Simply contact us for that. Individuals who like to organize an event for us to come to your city, you can also deal with no Quadifo distributor option on a short-term basis, sell some books. You can generate the funds, a few $100s to cover the flights and so forth. And then you can also, beyond that, generate additional funds for yourself. Once you cover those expenses, very often people can generate more funds. They sell 30 or 40 books or something like that in the community. Very often, because people see that our books only range between $8 and $11, they typically will buy 2 or more. They may buy Afurakai, the origin of the term Africa, for $10, and Madanechi, Divine Law and Divine Hate, for $10. And they'll spend 20 and have 2 books. So, for 20 people, you sell about 40 books and so forth. You may be able to not only cover the expense of the travel expense and so forth, but also begin to generate funds for yourself, additional income for yourself. So this is the model we put together for individuals who would like to bring this out but didn't have the funds to cover the travel expense. This is a way where you can generate those funds and generate funds beyond that for yourself as well, to employ yourself as well. That way, you don't have any out-of-pocket expenses. Of course, the people who attend our events, they don't pay an admission fee, so there's no out-of-pocket expense there. And, of course, we don't charge the speaker's fee, and they receive a free copy of one of our books. So this is the model that we use with regard to Gwamu Kasa, or public speech, rooted in our ancestral religion and culture. So we have a broadcast that we did on that. It's on our YouTube page as well as our regular website and so forth, the Gwamu Kasa page on our website. So check that out. Follow us on Twitter as Ojirafo. Follow us on YouTube as Ojirafo. Follow us on Instagram as Ojirafo. Follow us on Facebook. It's Kwabena Akan, but you can also type in Ojirafo or Afurakai. Get to us on Facebook. And again, Yerase, we thank you for tuning in, and we will be back on tomorrow. Yebechi Abio, we will meet again. That's that.